Raiden Shogun is probably one of the most polarizing characters in Genshin Impact. Some people absolutely love her, and other ones despise her. So today I want to focus on specifically what went wrong with Raiden's character development and dive deep into why she works better as an antagonist. If you randomly stumbled upon this video and you have no idea what I'm even talking about, then let me just say, Genshin Impact is a game that takes place in the world called Teyvat. Teyvat is divided into 7 nations, where each nation has a representative god that holds a magical element. Also, just a side note, gods in the game are called archons. For example, there's a nation called Inazuma, and they have a god of electro powers, so anything collected with electricity, lighting. People who live in Teyvat can also gain a magical element via visions. Visions are gifts from gods, so it's a way for a god to recognize someone's ambition and goals and passion and rewarding people for them, and basically saying that, hey, here's a magical power because I see that you're a very ambitious person, and hopefully this power is gonna help you achieve what you want in life. Don't come at me if I'm wrong. 500 years ago, outside of Teyvat, there was also a nation called Khaenri'ah. What was different about Khaenri'ah than the 7 nations of Teyvat was that this was the only nation without a god. It was a nation completely ruled by humans, and one of them, who was an alchemist, at some point started experimenting with a dark power called Abyss. And in the process of those experiments, they have created monsters. Those monsters started creating chaos and posing danger to all of the people living in Khaenri'ah. After a while, they also started leaking to Teyvat and causing people who lived in the 7 nations to also get hurt. And so, to stop that from happening, 6 out of 7 gods decided to unite and stop Khaenri'ah from both self-destruction and destruction of Teyvat. The tragedy of Khaenri'ah caused not only the whole country to fall, but also there were a lot of casualties from the Teyvat side. For example, one of them was Makoto. Makoto was an electro archon of Inazuma, and she had a twin sister named Ei. And this is the character we're gonna be talking about today. Before everything that happened in Khaenri'ah, Ei and Makoto used to be super close to each other. Makoto, as an archon, was a very gentle and kind person who pursued the idea of eternity. All of the gods actually have some sort of philosophy that they're trying to pursue. For example, in Mondstadt, the god of animal pursues freedom. And therefore, people who live in there have, well, freedom to do whatever they want. And in Inazuma, there was eternity. Makoto tried to pursue eternity by simply enjoying the present day and trying to take life as it is. They used to also have a friend called Yaimiko, and they all loved hanging around under the sakura tree, and those were the only times that were able to make Ei smile. Because even though Makoto and Ei were super close, they could not be any more different. Makoto was a very cheerful, kind, and gentle soul, where Ei was way more cold and distant, level-headed. On top of that, Makoto was not really a fighter, so Ei decided to take on that role and carry the responsibility of a shogun. And even though Makoto is long gone, Ei still wishes that she could just sit down under the sakura tree with her and her friends and stop the time forever. And remember that sentence because it's going to be very important later. After the war in Khaenri'ah and the loss of her sister, Ei needed to take over the responsibility of being an archon and pursue eternity. Ei decided to take a completely new approach to eternity. After witnessing all of the evil that humans have created, she started to believe that people are a threat to one another, and the only way to stop them from hurting each other is to pursue eternity in a way where nothing ever changes. Where there is progress, there must be loss. To help her with executing the idea of eternity, she created a puppet, a perfect imitation of her, who is unwavering and incapable of being changed by outsiders. So the puppet cannot be programmed, it cannot be hacked, it cannot be changed. It will always remain the same. And that puppet is called the Raiden Shogun. After successfully creating the puppet, Ei decided to handle over the responsibility to the Raiden Shogun to protect people of Inazuma, where she herself decided to put her consciousness into the blade that the Raiden puppet has, and thus was created Plane of Euthymia. I hope you're following. I realize how confusing it must be for someone who's never played Genshin Impact. Going back to the present day and the actual main quest of Genshin, we the players are called the Traveler. We're the main character, and as the name would suggest, we just travel from one nation to another. I'll not really be diving into the Traveler's lore because there is not enough time for this. We're just gonna focus on Raiden Ei. At some point in the story, the Traveler needs to get into Inazuma, however, they have no idea how, so they started looking for some clues. They encounter a girl called Atsuko who actually fled from Inazuma, and she's the first person we ever really hear anything about Inazuma from. Atsuko warns the Traveler about the very strict isolationist politics that Inazuma has, and tells them that no one can really travel there illegally because the Shogun surrounded Inazuma Islands with storms, and no illegal ships can navigate through it. How does the storm knows which ships are legal and which ships are not? Good question. I would also love to know that. Another character that gives us even more information about Inazuma is Kazuha, who also left that country. Oh my god. There is a huge bug here. I don't know where it went. I wonder if the camera picked it up.
Hello there.
Anyway, he gives the Traveler details about the so-called Vision Hunt Decree. Remember what visions are? Oh yes, these are the gifts from gods with magical power. So what does the Vision Hunt Decree mean? Basically, that means that the executors of the law, so I guess like police, are hunting down people with visions and confiscating them from them. Not only that, but the police, as well, many different police in real life as well, love abusing power. A lot of people in the process of having their visions taken away from them get
unlived. YouTube PLS, I didn't say a bad word.
One of those people is actually Kazuha's friend, who a few years earlier challenged the Raiden Shogun to a duel because he wanted to rebel against the Vision Hunt Decree and didn't want his vision to be taken away from him. However, he lost the battle and was killed on the spot. So Kazuha just grabbed his vision and ran away as fast as he could. Kazuha questions the whole Vision Hunt Decree. He doesn't really understand why is the Electro Archon even doing that? Isn't that literally everything against that Archons believe in? And not only that, visions, as I already said, are a way to recognize someone's ambitions. So what happens when you take that away from someone? You take away all of their ambitions, all of their goals, all of their reason to even exist. It's kind of like when you take away someone's vision, it's like you're giving them depression. They lose their sense of identity. They are basically empty shells. Doesn't that sound terrifying? Even Paimon, who's like a little helper of the Traveler, she says she sounds less like an Archon and more like a tyrant. Kazuha responds that the Raiden Shogun will pursue the eternity regardless of how anyone thinks or feels. And he even questions, what does eternity even bring to its people? Because I already briefly mentioned, in Mondstadt there's freedom. In Liyue there are contracts. Contracts grant people fairness in trade. What does eternity bring to people? After some digging around, the Traveler does find a way to get into Inazuma, and when they arrive, they meet Toma. Toma is a really sweet guy who just tells the traveler about how life looks like in Inazuma. For example, the traveler learns about absurdly huge taxes put on foreigners who came legally to trade. Those people are currently endangered on becoming homeless. And even better, they cannot even leave Inazuma legally anymore. So they're stuck in a country where they're borderline homeless because of the absurdly big taxes. Another thing that the traveler notices is, well, something that is very hard to not notice, but in the main city of Inazuma, there's this huge statue, and it's a statue of an omnipresent god. That should already give you an idea that this is in fact a statue representing the Electro Archon. But what is so creepy about this statue is the fact that on the statue there are visions that have been taken away from people. They are literally on the display, on the statue, kind of showing people that this is what's gonna happen to you. You're supposed to feel small and threatened just by looking at the statue. And the final push for the traveler was seeing how miserable those people are who had their visions being taken away. And they decided, no, someone needs to stop the Raiden Shogun. She is the villain. Oh, another thing that I forgot to mention, that in the process of, learning more things about Inazuma, the traveler breaks into the police station and notices that the police officers torture people. So, one day, Toma gets arrested and being taken in front of the statue of the omnipresent god because he is supposed to have a public execution of his vision being taken away from him. And the traveler is having none of that. They rush to him to stop it, and this is the first time ever where we, the players, finally see the Raiden Shogun. Up until then, we have only heard about the Raiden Shogun, and this is the first time we finally see her. And oh boy, what an entrance she has. She just walks down the stairs and you can feel the power from her. She looks at the traveler and is surprised that, wait, you can manipulate elements even though you don't have a vision. You must be an exception. Exceptions are a threat to eternity. So the Raiden Shogun pulls out the sword and the traveler gets sucked into plane of Euthymia, Ei's consciousness. And this is the first time ever where we get to talk to Ei. The traveler challenges Ei to a duel, but unfortunately loses miserably and is able to escape plane of Euthymia and save Toma. And someone has been watching travelers' every move and taken an interest in them. Yaimiko is one of Ei's oldest friends. Yaimiko says, this whole time I wasn't able to reach Ei in plane of Euthymia. I wasn't able to talk to her. She cut me off completely, but you were able to reach her. That means that Ei took an interest in you. And you may be able to stop her. You may be probably the only person capable of doing that. Yaimiko reveals to the traveler that what she saw at the public execution wasn't actually Ei, it was just a vessel, it was the puppet. And then when the traveler got sucked into the blade, only then they saw the real Ei. Another thing the traveler learns is the fact that the whole Vision Hunt decree, we thought that this was the idea of the puppet Shogun. Oh, if only we knew. It actually turns out that the idea behind the Vision Hunt decree is actually the Fatui. And Fatui are kind of like a Russian mafia. So basically, Russian mafia infiltrated Inazuma's government and now are manipulating everything. And there's a chance that Ei doesn't know about it. And Yaimiko comes up with a plan that, okay, traveler, we're gonna get you there again to the plane of Euthymia so that you can tell Ei about the Vision Hunt decree and maybe she's gonna stop it. After just, a few events. the traveler does manage to get into plane of Euthymia yet again. They tell A, hey girl, do you know about this whole vision hunt decree and the fact that the Russian mafia is actually pulling the strings behind the scenes?
Bombastic.
And I kid you not, A says, yeah, I know about it, and I allow it because it poses no threat to the eternity. Let me get this straight. A started pursuing the idea of eternity so that no one would start a war ever again, but then she allows the police forces to kill innocent people and torture them, and basically almost caused an outbreak of a domestic war in her own country. Fortunately, the traveler still has an ace up their sleeve and they're able to summon Yaimiko into the plane of Euthymia. And when Ace sees her for the first time in like 500 years, he's taken aback and is asking, wait, Miko, you're behind all of this? And you know what? Yaimiko is having none of Ace crap. You're the one that has been acting like a child from the very beginning. This is a literal quote. Yaimiko tells A that she just locked herself like a little girl in her room inside of that blade, created the plane of Euthymia so that she doesn't actually have to take care of the people inside of Inazuma. In reality, everything that A did to protect people, to pursue the eternity, etc., all of that, if anything, hurt people more instead of helping them. What people want is not some divine eternity. People just want their god to be there for them. And then A just abolishes the Vision Hunt decree and suddenly everything is solved. Like all the problems are just gone because A talked to her bestie. 500 years of complete abuse of power and oppression were just snatched away with one conversation. You see, when the traveler and Yaimiko arrive in the plane of Euthymia and they talk to A, the writers out of nowhere decided to take a 180 with A's character, and suddenly she went from the antagonist to the hero. And I'm just looking at this like, wait, where did that come from? And that's literally it when it comes to the main story quest. A just became the good guy 95% into the story, even though for that whole 95%, she was the bad guy that we're trying to stop. I won't go into too much detail with Raiden's story quests because except for the main quest in Genshin, you can also do 2 personal story quests for each character. A also has 2 of them. The first one is honestly a disappointment of a story quest because A just decides to, leave her plane of Euthymia, walk around Inazuma, and have Dango. And then the second story quest was the one that I actually really liked because in the second one, A realizes that she will still continue being the threat to her own people if the puppet shogun exists. Because you remember the puppet, right? The puppet was supposed to be this unchangeable and powerful force that will always pursue the eternity. And so A realizes that she needs to pay the consequences of her actions and she needs to stop the puppet, even though the puppet is indestructible. She takes the puppet and challenges it to an eternal duel. Because that is how perfect the puppet is. She's never gonna be able to change that puppet. And I like that. I like that the conclusion of A's story is that, well, she wanted to create the eternity, and ironically, now she has to stop the eternity from happening. That was really good. But in order to get there, you need to read through the first story quest, which in my opinion is low-key a flop, and only then you feel like there is some sort of character development. And I remember when I was playing the game myself, I just felt very unsatisfied with the direction that A was taking in. And I started thinking, but what went wrong? And I think I have the answer to that. You see, whenever you write a character, regardless if it's for a book or a movie or a game, you need to focus on 2 things. I even have a board. What you need to focus on while writing is the setup and the character development. The setup being the background story, personality, friends, relationships, etc. And the development is what actually happens in the story. We're gonna start with the setup. We already established that Ei from the very beginning was set up to be the antagonist. Not just really personality-wise, but rather because of her philosophy of the eternity and also politics. And yeah, I realize you probably didn't expect that I'm gonna be talking about philosophy and politics. And so, to make things a little bit easier, we're gonna compare Ei to a different fictional character who just so happens to have the same exact philosophy. If you recognize this person, then you're probably looking at me like, what you say? But let me explain. And for context, if you don't know who this is Coriolanus Snow from the Hunger Games trilogy. He is the president of a country known as Panem, divided into the capital and the 12 districts. The politics of Panem revolve around the exploitation and oppression of the 12 districts for the benefit of the capital. Back over 80 years prior to the trilogy, the districts decided to rebel against the capital, but unfortunately they have lost the war. To punish the districts, the capital decided to organize the Hunger Games, where every single year, each district needs to present a boy and a girl from ages from 12 to 18 to fight in a life or death tournament where only one person can come out of it alive and win. I think that the concept in itself is already really terrifying, and it just shows what kind of measures the capital is willing to go for to maintain peace and control. And as we learn in the prequel, Coriolanus Snow kept the Hunger Games going for 75 years, not just because he wanted to punish the districts. No. We learn that the Hunger Games are actually just a physical representation of power. They are a symbol of control that the capital holds over the districts. They're supposed to show the districts that, see, this is what you guys are. You're just a bunch of kids willing to kill one another. And we, the capital, we're so much better than all of you. And that kind of oppressive and strong power is actually a reflection of a real life philosophy created by Thomas Hobbes. Which, by the way, fun fact, Suzanne Collins actually quoted Hobbes on the very first page of the prequel. So, you know, I gotta give props to Suzanne. She did her research and I really respect her for that. In his book called Leviathan, Thomas Hobbes talks about the importance of an authoritarian figure who can rule over society with an iron fist, because he believes that society in its natural state is chaotic, dangerous, and prone to war. I'm going to put a few quotes from that book on the screen so that you can get a better feeling of what this philosophy is about, but I specifically want to talk about one of them. And I think this is the one that actually Suzanne quoted also in her book. Hereby it is manifest that during the time men live without a common power to keep them all in awe, they are in that condition which is called war, and such a war as is of every man against every man. Let me rephrase it to slightly more simple English so that we can actually understand. Thomas Hobbes says that if we just allow humans to exist without any common power, so without any king, government, dictator, whatever it is, people are a threat to one another and they will start wars with each other, because in a way Thomas Hobbes suggests that our nature, human nature, is evil. And with that mindset, the main antagonist of the Hunger Games trilogy, Coriolanus Snow, after witnessing the cruelty of war, that exact evil human nature, he starts to believe that he must become that authoritarian figure so that he can take over the power in Panem and enforce laws that will create peace in the country. And he will do it even if maintaining peace costs life of innocent children.
We both know I'm not above children. but I'm not wasteful. I take life for specific reasons.
And now if we try to mirror that same exact mentality in Raiden Ei, we will be able to easily see that she is also an authoritarian figure in her own country. After witnessing the tragedy and war in Kanria, the loss of her sister, the evil human nature, she starts to believe that the only way to prevent people from hurting one another is to pursue the eternity, where nothing can change. And therefore no one can achieve enough power to start a war. No one can enter Inazuma to start a war. No one can use their vision to start a war, etc. So if Coriolanus and Ei have the same exact philosophy, what else do they have in common? Obviously, the first similarity we're gonna put is the Hope's philosophy. The second one, I think that a lot of people would say it's rather a difference between the character, but I would argue not. I would argue that this is actually a similarity. For Koryo, he has a god complex. He believes that he's better than everyone else. He believes that he is appropriate for that role of an authority because he can see everything in like a bigger picture. He puts himself above everyone. Everyone is just narrow-minded compared to him. Ei, however, quite literally is God. It naturally puts her on a higher position than everyone else because, again, naturally she does have a bigger understanding of humanity, and quite literally everyone is below her. Unwillingness and change. For Koryo, as I said, he believes that he's better than everyone else, but specifically when it came to people from the districts, he didn't even look at people from the districts as humans. He compared them more to wild animals. Even when he met Lucy Gray, who came from one of the districts, but Koryo was so set on the mindset that people from the districts are worse that he literally made up an entire story in his head that, well, Lucy Gray, she must come from the capital if that's the case, because like she's not like all of those other savages or something like that. And it was just him making up stuff, refusing to accept the fact that maybe someone from the districts is also a good person. He's completely unwilling to change his mind. For Raiden Ei, it is the whole idea of eternity, her believing that progress comes with loss, her believing that she needs to stop the time forever, that she needs to stop people at the exact state that they are because otherwise bad things can happen. Public demonstration of power. For Coriolanus, no, it's of course the Hunger Games, and for Raiden Ei, the statue of the omnipresent god with all of those visions on it. And finally, they are both an antagonist in their own story. The main difference, however, between these characters is the commitment on the writer's side to them staying as an antagonist. Suzanne Collins never really tried to make Koryo a sympathetic character. When you read about his tragic past, it wasn't supposed to make you feel bad for him. You were just supposed to understand why he is the way he is. How did that influence the way he thinks about other people in the world? In Ei's case, the writers were in fact committed to her being the antagonist, until they just weren't, and they decided to drop her tragic background story for you as the player to out of nowhere gain empathy for her and feel bad for her, and therefore you would be like, oh well, she just has a tragic background story, so that's why she's evil now. You see, this is just bad writing. When you try to write a redemption arc, you need to do it right. It cannot be half-assed, and it definitely cannot happen 95% into the main story quest. It has to be something that happens very slowly and progressive throughout the whole thing, that when it finally happens, it feels natural, it feels organic, and most importantly, earned. And that's why, as I said earlier, whenever you write a character, you need to focus on both the setup and the development. And we can already see that Ei's setup was really well done. It was basically the same level as Coriolanus' Snow setup. However, it is a little bit lacking on the character development side. And to tell you exactly what went wrong with her redemption arc and character development, we're gonna compare her to yet another very famous character who probably till this day has the best ever written character development story.
Hello, Zuko here.
Zuko is one of the main antagonists in the Avatar: The Last Airbender cartoon. If you've never seen Avatar: The Last Airbender, then this is the world divided into 4 nations where every single one of them has a special magical element in it. We have fire, earth, air, and water. Years prior to that, the Fire Nation decided to attack all the other nations to basically colonize them. And it is believed that the only person capable of stopping the Fire Nation is the Avatar. The Avatar is the only person in the entire world who can bend all 4 elements, but he has not been seen for the past 100 years. We start the story with Zuko being on a mission to capture the Avatar, even though the Avatar has not been seen for so many years. And we don't really know much about Zuko. All we know really is that he has a scar on his face and that he is just very bratty, annoying, and entitled. We start learning only little bits and bits of information about Zuko throughout the whole show. For example, we learned that he is the prince of the Fire Nation, that he has been banished from it, and that he's on a mission to restore his honor through capturing the Avatar. He actually got his scar from his own father. Zuko spoke out of turn at a meeting and therefore he disrespected his father. So what his father did was that he challenged Zuko to a public duel, you could call it. And Zuko didn't even want to defend himself. He was on his knees crying and apologizing to his father that he didn't want to disrespect him, that it's never gonna happen again. But the Fire Nation Lord doesn't stop and he still hurts Zuko. That's why he has that scar. His own father burned it publicly in front of everyone to demonstrate that this is what happens when you disrespect me. Not only that, but the Fire Nation Lord banishes Zuko from his home country and says that you cannot come back until you capture the Avatar. He basically sends his son on an impossible mission. He's aware that the Avatar has not been seen for the past 100 of years, and so Zuko is so fixated on finding the Avatar, on capturing him, because Zuko is just a teen. He just wants to come back home. He wants his father approval. And in the moment where we learn about Zuko's past, we do in fact gain a little bit of empathy for him. But then we have this starking contrast of the way he is right now. And we know him as a really annoying and angry and a person who's willing to hurt others. We don't really feel that for him. We don't feel like what he's doing right now is being excused because of his tragic past. No, we just simply now understand why he's so obsessed with finding the Avatar. We understand why he's willing to go for such measures to capture him. Even better, Zuko gets a ton of opportunities to be the good guy throughout the whole show, but he still reverses back to being the antagonist. And I think it's because the writers of the show just really understood human psychology. They understood that progress and change is really slow, and it most importantly has to come from us. They knew that they can't make, for example, heroes come to Zuko and save him and change him. No, they knew that Zuko needs to realize this on his own and wants to become the good guy. And let me tell you, Zuko takes his sweet 3 seasons to even start questioning whether what he is doing is the right thing or not. And even in the moment where the heroes showed him so much kindness and empathy, he still chose to fight them. Even better, at some point Zuko even accomplishes all of his goals. He captures the avatar, he's able to come back to the country, his father approves of him, he's now a prince again, he has friends, he even has a girlfriend. And you would think that, well, Zuko got everything he has ever wanted, right? He should be happy. Exactly. He should be happy. And yet, he's not. He's not satisfied and grows more and more frustrated, and he doesn't understand why. Zuko at some point is even questioned by his friends and his girlfriend. Are you angry at me? Are you angry at Dad? And then continue pushing him, asking, who are you so angry at? Why are you behaving such way? And Zuko finally explodes, yelling,
I'm angry at myself! Because I'm confused. Because I'm not sure I know the difference between right and wrong anymore.
I had chills and tears when I watched that scene, let me tell you. In that moment, Zuko realizes that he's not satisfied with his own choices, that he has disappointed not only his uncle, who has been always there for him, supporting him, seeing the good in him, but he also disappointed himself. Then Zuko decides to go on this really long journey to redeem his wrongdoings and is not accepted by literally anyone. His family thinks that he's a traitor because suddenly he wants to join the good guys' side. The good guys, on the other hand, don't want to accept him because of everything he has done so far. He hurt them so much. They don't believe that he suddenly wants to be the good guy. Zuko, even though he's being rejected so much, he does not give up. He shows humility, stubbornness, and most importantly, a will to do good. But ironically, he sucks at it. He sucks at being the good guy and he knows it. So he tries to look within himself and turn all of that fire and anger that he once held against the world and redirects it into a force full of empathy, care, and determination to join what he believes is the right cause. Zuko is a perfect example of a good character development, an antagonist who turns into a hero. So let's look at key points in Zuko's journey. Commitment to being the bad guy from the writer's perspective, stepping outside of his comfort zone and seeing his own wrongdoings from the victim's perspective. There's a chapter where Zuko has to live undercover in the Earth Kingdom, and he meets people who have been physically hurt by the Fire Nation. He sees people with burn scars who tell him how much they have suffered. And that's the first time ever where he starts thinking, wait, what if we're the bad guys? But he still reverses back to being the antagonist. Why? Because of his personal goals. He cares more about being accepted by his father and going back home than, random people. He gets offered help and friendship from the heroes. And again, he still reverses back. He even achieves his goals, but feels lack of satisfaction and starts self-reflections. He makes the decision out of his own free will to change. Attempts, keyword here, to become a good guy, but it's not accepted by anyone. He retries to do the good thing, but still fails. And after that, finally retries with a completely new approach by using his strengths to help the good guys. He slowly starts earning trust of the heroes team, one by one, and then ultimately helps them defeat the main villain. Now, if you compare this character development journey to Ei's journey, we will end up with something like this. The commitment to being the bad guy from writer's perspective, yeah, that's the same for Ei. She also achieves all of her goals, and then she just changes her mind. I guess her journey is much shorter, isn't it? Not only is it short, but it also comes out of nowhere. Ei just changes her mind after talking to her best friend. So it's not even out of her own free will. Ei never doubts whether what she does is a bad thing. She never considers that her actions may be hurting other people. Ei also is very much satisfied after achieving her goals and approves of the Vision Hunt decree. She literally says that it poses no threat to eternity. Unlike Zuko, who after achieving his goals, he just grows more and more frustrated with his own choices. And finally, Ei just gets forgiven by everyone for no reason really, except for the fact that, I don't know, maybe she's just a god and everyone is scared to be offended by a god, I don't know. Zuko, for comparison, oh, no one is having his character development. No one accepts him as the good guy. He immediately gets kicked out and repeatedly proven that literally no one trusts him. He needs to earn that trust. He needs to pay the consequences of his own actions. So he tries little by little and finally he earns that forgiveness. Ei doesn't have that at all for some reason. Even the traveler, because I can understand maybe people who live in Inazuma that are scared of Raiden Shogun, so obviously they're not gonna make her pay the consequences of what she did. But the traveler, why would the traveler be scared of her? The traveler should be bitter. I kind of wish there was that dynamic. And most importantly, this is the same difference that actually Coriolanus Snow had with Ei, and that is that the tragic background story for both Zuko and Koryo was never there for you to excuse their actions. No, it was always there for you so that you understand where these characters are coming from and why they are the way they are. Where with Ei, her background story is dropped at the very end, right before she has her 180, and it's only there to make you as the viewer/reader feel empathy for her. There was so much more attention being put into setting up Raiden. Her setup is to be the antagonist. This side basically for Ei doesn't really exist. It's only this. And this guy, as you know, he's the villain. He's the bad guy. But when you look at Zuko, you don't actually think of Zuko as the villain, do you? You think of him as a person who had a really big character development. Heck, a lot of people would consider him a hero, but Ei doesn't have that part. So when you think of Ei, you think of a villain. That's why she works better as an antagonist, because her character development side is severely lacking. So what could have happened? Is it possible to fix Ei? Short answer, yes. There's a ton of ways you could improve her. Long one, first, before I even start fixing Ei, I think it's really important for me to appreciate what was done well, which is of course the setup. I personally loved the way Ei was introduced. Remember that huge entrance that she had when she was walking down those stairs looking at the traveler? There was something so epic about it. I loved it. I felt like, wow, this is the first time ever where we see an archon who's actually not the good guy. We see someone anonymous and powerful, terrifying. It was a breath of fresh air. And you can see that there was a lot of research put into writing Ei and setting up everything for her so that she works really well as the Electro Archon. In my opinion, a better approach to her character would have been if the main story quest ended with Ei still being the antagonist. Instead of her dropping her background story and then suddenly becoming the good guy, I wish that that background story was kind of sprinkled throughout the whole Inazuma quest, and we learned little tiny bits of her past, her relationship with Makoto, Yaimiko, her becoming the Raiden Shogun in maybe flashbacks or dreams that the traveler has. And then finally, when we get to Ei at the very end of the story in the plane of Euthymia, we already kind of know who Ei is, and we will expect Ei to make that decision on her own, because if you put that tragic background story at the very end, it feels more like, oh, suddenly you as the reader are supposed to change your mind and you're supposed to do a character development in your own head instead of actually seeing it in the story. And I really wish that the main story ended with Ei being very wary of both the traveler and Yaimiko, not really believing in what they're saying, especially because we learned that she knew about the Vision Hunt decree, so she doesn't want to abolish it. She sees no reason to do it. And I wish that her character development journey started happening in those personal personal story quests. And maybe the first quest I would change completely. I think the second story quest is really good. As I said, I love that she essentially has to pay the consequences of her actions and she needs to take on an eternal battle with the puppet Shogun. The first story quest though, oh, I would change a lot. My idea would be that maybe after talking to Miko and Traveler in the main story quest, Ei decides that maybe I just need to step outside of Plane of Eutimia just once in a while. Maybe she would need to disguise herself as one of the Inazumans so no one recognizes her, and only then she could see how people actually are living in Inazuma. Maybe she could meet all those people whose visions were taken away from them. Maybe she could see how the executors of law are abusing the power, and only then she would start realizing that what if it's all because of me? What if people are actually scared of me and they don't see me as a person who's constantly trying to help them and make this country better? I wish that the first story quest was her just learning about her own country and just starting to question her own doings. And then after that, in the second story quest, she could abolish the Vision Hunt decree and take on that eternal battle with the puppet. If you really think about it, it doesn't have to be that big and drastic changes. Most of the story is essentially going to stay the same. It's always the little things that make the biggest difference. But I guess this is just like a learning lesson for everyone, is that keeping the tragic background story till the very end for the shock value and for the readers to out of nowhere gain empathy for the main characters, not good. And of course, at the end, I want to ask you guys how you feel about Raiden Shogun. Do you like the way her character was handled? Maybe you actually love her character development story, or the opposite, you hate it and you would do it completely different than how I described it. And also let me know how you feel about this format of a video, because I've never done anything like this. Usually I just do gameplay videos, but I really wanted to talk about this. I've briefly mentioned that I have mixed feelings about the direction that the Raiden Shogun's character was taken in, and I felt like, what if just one day I sit down and finally talk about it?